The swamp on Oak Island has always carried a strange reputation, even among seasoned researchers who have spent years trying to understand the island's hidden history. Because unlike other dig sites where resistance feels predictable or natural, this area behaves differently, almost as if it was shaped with intention rather than formed by chance. And that feeling becomes impossible to ignore the moment the team returns with upgraded tools and a renewed sense of urgency. What once looked like a simple, waterlogged obstacle now feels like a sealed boundary, a place where something important may have been deliberately buried and protected over time. As the crew positions heavy machinery along the unstable edges, the atmosphere immediately changes, not because of what is seen, but because of what is expected, since every previous attempt in this zone has ended in confusion, flooding, or unexplained structural interference beneath the surface. This time, however, the approach is more controlled, more precise, and more determined, as if the team collectively understands that the swamp is no longer just a natural barrier but a potential cover for something significant. The ground itself reacts strangely under pressure, soft in some areas yet resistant in others, creating a sense that layers have been placed rather than naturally settled. As excavation begins, progress is slow, almost reluctant, with every bucket of material revealing more questions than answers, and the deeper they go, the stronger the feeling becomes that something unusual is positioned far below the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Then subtle anomalies begin to appear, small at first but impossible to dismiss, such as uneven resistance beneath the drill, and sudden changes in soil density that do not align with natural sediment patterns. The operators notice it immediately, pausing not out of confusion alone, but out of instinct, because experienced crews recognize when the ground stops behaving normally. There is a moment of silence, heavy and uncertain, as the equipment is adjusted and carefully lowered again, only for the same unnatural resistance to return, stronger and more defined this time. It is not random rock or buried debris. It feels structured, deliberate, as if the earth is pressing against something man-made beneath it. That realization shifts everything. The energy on site changes from routine excavation to focused investigation, and every movement becomes more careful, more intentional, as if the team is now walking around a hidden boundary rather than simply digging into soil. As scanning technology is brought in to confirm what they are encountering, the readings begin to form patterns that do not resemble natural formations, instead, hinting at clean lines and geometric consistency beneath layers of swamp sediment that have built up over centuries. The possibility starts to form slowly but powerfully in everyone's mind that they may not be dealing with random geology at all, but with something constructed, something intentionally placed and sealed away beneath the swamp for reasons still unknown. The weight of that thought changes the entire excavation, because it means they are no longer just digging into land, but potentially uncovering something that was meant to remain hidden. And, as the swamp continues to resist every attempt at deeper access, the mystery only grows stronger, pulling the team further into a discovery that feels less like chance and more like a long-buried secret finally beginning to surface. As the excavation deepens in the swamp, the tension on site begins to shift from curiosity into something far more intense. Because the moment the drill makes contact with what lies beneath the surface, everything changes in an instant, and the entire operation is forced to pause as the sound alone tells the crew that this is not ordinary ground. Instead of the expected mix of soft sediment, scattered rock, and waterlogged soil, the drill suddenly meets a resistance that feels unnaturally solid, almost engineered, as if it has struck a deliberately placed barrier hidden beneath layers of swamp material. The operators immediately notice the difference in vibration through the machinery, a sharp, consistent feedback that doesn't match natural formations, and that alone is enough to draw everyone's attention toward the center of the dig site. At first there is hesitation, because in a place like Oak Island, assumptions can be dangerous, but the readings begin to confirm what the crew is physically feeling. The drill is not simply hitting rock, it is meeting a structured density that behaves too uniformly to be random. The sound changes as well, shifting from dull grinding to a sharper, more controlled impact, as if the tool is striking something intentionally placed rather than naturally formed. This is the moment where instinct overtakes routine procedure, and the team realizes they are no longer dealing with a standard excavation problem. The ground is carefully tested again, slightly adjusting position and angle, hoping to find a natural break in the resistance, but instead the same result repeats, stronger and more consistent, almost like an invisible wall buried beneath centuries of swamp accumulation. The seriousness of the situation begins to settle in as the crew exchanges brief, uncertain looks, because experienced excavators understand that nature rarely creates perfectly consistent barriers underground, especially not in formations that extend with such precision. As more data is gathered, the anomaly becomes clearer, revealing a shape that does not align with surrounding geological patterns. It is not jagged or irregular like natural rock deposits. Instead, it suggests flatness, continuity, and intentional structure, which raises immediate questions about what could have been placed beneath the swamp and why it was hidden so carefully. The machine is slowed, not because of mechanical failure, but because caution becomes necessary, as pushing too aggressively could damage whatever lies below or destabilize the entire site. The weight of the discovery begins to sink in, because this is no longer just about digging deeper, but about potentially uncovering something man-made that has remained untouched for an unknown period of time. The swamp, which has always been unpredictable and deceptive, now feels like a deliberate covering layer placed over something that was never meant to be easily accessed. Every movement from this point forward carries significance. Every adjustment to the drill becomes part of a much larger moment of realization that the resistance beneath them is not accidental but possibly intentional. And, as the team stands over the site processing what they have just encountered, the atmosphere shifts from exploration to something closer to anticipation mixed with caution, because what they have struck is not just hard ground, but the edge of a mystery that refuses to reveal itself easily, as if whatever lies beneath is still actively holding its position against discovery. As the excavation continues and the team pushes beyond the initial point of resistance, the situation evolves from a simple anomaly into something far more structured and unsettling, because the data coming in from sonar and ground-penetrating scans begins to reveal patterns that do not belong to natural geology. At first, the shapes are faint and fragmented, appearing as blurred outlines beneath layers of swamp sediment. But as more readings are collected and the area is carefully mapped, those fragments start to align in a way that no longer feels random. Instead of uneven density or chaotic underground formations, the scans begin to show edges that are surprisingly straight, angles that appear too precise, and boundaries that seem to define a contained space rather than a naturally occurring void. This is the moment where caution turns into focus, because experienced researchers know that nature does not often produce symmetry at this level, especially not beneath unstable swamp ground that has been shifting for centuries. The team slows the excavation, not because they have found nothing, but because they may have found something too important to rush. Every new scan adds another piece to the emerging picture, and slowly a shape begins to form that looks disturbingly intentional, as if an underground structure has been buried beneath layers of deliberate concealment. The outline does not resemble a cave or a collapsed geological pocket. Instead, it suggests containment, something enclosed and separated from the surrounding earth, almost like a sealed chamber or compartment hidden beneath the swamp floor. As this realization begins to settle in, the atmosphere on site changes noticeably, with the usual rhythm of excavation replaced by careful observation and controlled movement, because the possibility that they are dealing with a man-made structure introduces an entirely new level of significance to the dig. The scans show consistency and thickness along the boundaries, as if walls or reinforced layers exist beneath the sediment, and that detail immediately raises questions about purpose, construction, and origin. Why would something like this be placed here? And more importantly, why would it be buried so deeply beneath one of the most unstable areas of the island? The swamp, which has always been treated as a natural obstacle, now begins to feel like a deliberate cover, a protective layer designed to hide what lies below from view and from time. As the mapping becomes more refined, the structure appears larger than initially expected, extending beyond the original dig boundaries and suggesting that what they are seeing may only be a portion of a much bigger underground system. This possibility adds weight to every decision made on site, because uncovering something of this scale requires precision, patience, and caution, especially when water intrusion and unstable soil are already constant threats. The more the team studies the data, the clearer it becomes that this is not a simple void or random formation, but something that carries the signature of intention, as if it was designed to remain hidden for as long as possible. And as the outline sharpens into something increasingly defined, the realization spreads quietly among the crew that they may be standing above a buried structure that has waited undisturbed for centuries, holding its secrets beneath layers of swamp and time, until now. As the excavation progresses and the shape beneath the swamp becomes clearer, the atmosphere on site shifts again, this time from cautious investigation into a deeper sense of urgency mixed with disbelief. Because what the scans and partial exposure are suggesting is no longer just an anomaly, but the presence of something that closely resembles a deliberately constructed underground vault. The idea doesn't arrive all at once, it builds slowly, as each new layer of swamp material is removed and each scan adds more definition to the structure below. Clean edges begin to stand out against the surrounding chaos of natural sediment, forming boundaries that feel too precise to be accidental. The team notices that the structure does not fade irregularly into the earth like a cave or sinkhole would, but instead maintains consistent lines, as if it was designed to hold its shape under pressure. That detail alone begins to shift the entire meaning of the discovery, because in a place like Oak Island, anything structured underground immediately raises questions about purpose and intent. As more of the area is exposed, the possibility becomes harder to ignore. This could be a sealed chamber, intentionally buried and protected beneath layers of swamp and time. The word vault begins to circulate quietly among the crew, not as a conclusion, but as a growing suspicion that fits too many of the observed patterns to be dismissed. However, this realization also brings immediate complications, because the swamp is not a stable environment, and every attempt to dig deeper causes water to rush in from unseen channels beneath the surface. The ground begins to soften more aggressively as excavation continues, forcing the team to constantly reinforce the site just to maintain basic control over the operation. Heavy machinery works in tight coordination with pumps and supports, but the deeper they go, the more the environment resists, as if the earth itself is reacting to the intrusion. This creates a dangerous balance between discovery and collapse, where every inch forward carries the risk of losing everything to flooding or structural failure. Despite this, the team continues carefully, driven by the possibility that they are approaching something historically significant. The structure beneath them appears not only intentional but also carefully shielded, positioned in a way that suggests it was meant to avoid detection for as long as possible. Its placement beneath the swamp is particularly striking because it uses one of the most unstable and deceptive environments on the island as a natural layer of protection, making access extremely difficult without modern equipment. As more of the outline is revealed, the sense of scale also begins to grow, hinting that what lies beneath may be larger than initially assumed, extending beyond the immediate dig zone and possibly connecting to other hidden features underground. This realization adds pressure to every decision being made, because the team now understands that they are not just uncovering a single buried object, but potentially a constructed system designed with intention and complexity. And, as the excavation reaches a critical point where more of the structure becomes visible, the tension peaks, because it is no longer a question of whether something is there, but how far it extends and what purpose it was built to serve, leaving the team standing at the edge of a discovery that could redefine everything they thought they understood about the swamp. As the excavation pushes deeper into the swamp and the structure beneath becomes more exposed, the operation begins to shift from controlled digging into a high-risk race against time, because the environment itself starts to react more aggressively to what the team is uncovering. Water intrusion, which was already present in earlier stages, now intensifies noticeably, seeping into the dig zone from multiple directions as if the swamp is actively trying to reclaim the disturbed ground. The soil loses stability faster than expected, turning firm sections into soft, collapsing pockets that threaten the integrity of the entire excavation site. Every movement of the machinery has to be calculated with extreme precision, because even a small misstep could trigger a partial cave-in that would erase hours of progress in seconds. The pumps are pushed to their limits, constantly working to keep the water levels manageable, but the deeper the team goes, the harder it becomes to maintain control. It feels less like digging into earth and more like holding back a force that refuses to be disturbed. The structure beneath, now partially visible through scans and limited exposure, sits like a fixed point in the middle of this instability, unaffected in shape but increasingly difficult to access. This contrast makes the situation even more intense, because while the surrounding swamp collapses and shifts, the object beneath remains consistent, almost as if it was placed there with the expectation that it would eventually be found under these exact conditions. As excavation continues, reinforcing systems are rapidly deployed, including support beams and drainage adjustments, but each layer of protection only temporarily slows the instability rather than solving it. The team is forced to work in short, controlled bursts, stopping frequently to reassess conditions and prevent a full-scale collapse. Tension builds not only from the physical danger, but also from the psychological pressure of knowing how close they might be to something significant, yet how easily it could be lost if the ground gives way completely. The deeper they go, the more unpredictable the swamp becomes, with sudden shifts in soil density and unexpected water surges creating constant uncertainty. Even experienced operators begin to show signs of strain, because there is no clear point at which the danger ends and the discovery begins. Both are happening at the same time. Despite the risks, the team continues forward, driven by the belief that stopping now would mean leaving something important buried just out of reach. The structure beneath appears more defined with each adjustment, but access remains limited by the unstable conditions above it, creating a frustrating gap between what is known and what can actually be reached. This gap becomes the defining challenge of the excavation, as every decision now carries dual consequences: progress toward discovery or increased risk of collapse. The swamp, which has always been unpredictable, now feels almost defensive, as if it is resisting the exposure of what lies beneath. And as the pressure mounts, the team realizes that reaching the structure is no longer just a matter of digging deeper, but of surviving long enough to do so, because the closer they get to uncovering the vault-like formation, the more the environment seems determined to stop them from ever fully revealing it. As the excavation reaches its most critical stage and the structure beneath the swamp becomes partially exposed, the atmosphere shifts into something almost unrecognizable from where it began, because what was once a routine investigation has now transformed into a moment charged with anticipation, danger, and the overwhelming sense that something significant is finally within reach. The visible sections of the underground formation suggest far more than a simple cavity or natural void. Instead, they hint at a deliberate design, something constructed with intention and then carefully concealed beneath layers of swamp sediment, water, and time. The edges that can now be seen are too clean, too consistent, and too structured to be dismissed as geological coincidence, and that realization settles heavily over the entire team. Every movement slows as the focus shifts from excavation to cautious revelation, because whatever lies beneath is no longer just a possibility, but a physical presence waiting to be fully uncovered. The deeper layers suggest enclosure, almost like a sealed chamber protected by natural barriers and reinforced by centuries of environmental pressure. This is not the kind of formation that reveals itself easily, and that resistance only strengthens the suspicion that it was never meant to be found quickly, or perhaps not found at all without significant effort. As the swamp continues to push back through water intrusion and unstable soil, the contrast becomes even more striking. The surrounding environment is chaotic, collapsing, and unpredictable, while the structure beneath remains defined and deliberate, as if it exists outside the rules of nature that govern everything above it. This contrast fuels the sense that what lies below is not accidental but purposeful, something that was placed with care and hidden with equal precision. The team works carefully around the exposed areas, knowing that one wrong move could destabilize the entire site, yet the pull of discovery makes every delay feel heavier than the risk itself. There is a growing awareness that they may be looking at something that has remained untouched for centuries, preserved not by luck, but by design and circumstance working together in perfect concealment. As more of the structure becomes visible, the imagination naturally fills in the gaps, and the idea of a vault begins to feel less like speculation and more like a reasonable explanation for what they are seeing: a sealed space, hidden beneath one of the most unstable environments on the island, protected by layers of swamp that act almost like a natural lock. But even as this possibility becomes stronger, certainty remains just out of reach, because the final layers of obstruction still conceal what lies inside. That unknown element becomes the most powerful force on site, driving both caution and urgency at the same time. And as the team stands at the edge of full exposure, looking into the partially revealed structure, the realization settles in that they are no longer simply uncovering ground, but standing at the threshold of a discovery that could redefine everything they believed about what was hidden beneath the swamp, leaving one final question hanging in the air: what exactly has been sealed away inside this buried formation, and why was it hidden so deeply from the world above? As the excavation slows and the swamp finally settles, the team is left standing at the edge of something they never expected to see in such clear form. Beneath layers of mud, water, and time, they have uncovered what appears to be a deliberately constructed underground structure, hidden, protected, and positioned in a way that suggests intention rather than coincidence. But even with parts of it exposed, the full truth remains just out of reach.